Hello everybody, it's me, Geno Samuel 3, coming at you with a very different type of video from what I usually offer on this channel. This is a kind of behind the scenes making of kind of video that's going to be featured in my upcoming documentary about Otabenga, so please check that out once it's up. So the premise of this project is I'm making a little neighborhood. It's a real neighborhood consisting of real houses that were built a long time ago, and they're going to be featured in my upcoming documentary. So my upcoming documentary is about Otabenga. He was a person of African origin who was born in the Congo, and early on in the 1900s, he had a very unfortunate time in the United States. So I'm going to be talking about that. Just like my previous long-form documentaries, like the North Sentinel Island documentary and the Terra Nova expedition to the South Pole documentary, and also the Laika documentary, they all feature these Blender renders, basically, these CG renders that better illustrate the story and basically better help you visualize what I'm talking about. So I wanted to try the same thing here, but in Unreal Engine, which is, I think, going to look a lot more realistic, and that's what I'm going for, is realism this time. So this is my idea for the video. There's going to be a little prologue just to introduce the basic concept of what Otabenga was, and then we're going to open with this pan-out shot of the street, and it's going to say in titles, Montclair, New Jersey, 1928. It's going to be panning out. You're going to see these houses across the street, and the camera's going to pan through the window of another house across the street, and then you're going to be inside some kind of room. And in this room is the hypothetical narrator of the story. And this person was a real person who lived at this particular address, which I'm not going to reveal to you. And this person personally knew and loved Otabenga. So there's a slight fictitious aspect to this documentary where this person is basically going through a scrapbook comprised of photos and newspaper clippings of Otabenga, keeping his memory alive and just, reminiscing the entire story. And this is the catalyst for the rest of the telling of the documentary. And at the very end is going to be a final pan out where you see the narrator's house from the outside, and it's going to pan out a bit, and you see at the end the neighbors' houses on either side, and that's going to be the end of the documentary. So this is the scene which I'm working on here. First, they were built in Blender and then transported to Unreal Engine 5. So now once I made my model based on a map from 1933 and based on Google Maps and Google Street View, I converted everything to FBX, I believe. And this way I can import all these meshes to Unreal Engine 5, which I didn't really work with at all. I just kind of have a very basic knowledge of Unreal Engine 5. So anyway, I just created my little folder here, called it Montclair. This is Montclair, New Jersey, by the way. I'm not going to tell you the street name because I just want to protect the privacy of the people who actually live in these buildings still. These buildings still exist, and they did exist back in 1928, which is going to be the setting of these couple of scenes that are going to appear in the Otabenga documentary here. So anyway, this is the first time I've ever done this. I imported all my meshes from Blender into Unreal Engine 5, and they look quite big, and I had a little look around. I didn't bother with making textures because I know I'm gonna make all the textures from Unreal Engine 5, and I decided that it didn't look good. I had some normals issues. Some normals were reversed and didn't look good, so I deleted everything a couple of times and then went back to Blender again to slightly modify and flip normals, recalculate normals as well, and hopefully fix things up. I learned that I didn't actually model these buildings very efficiently. They cause a bit of errors once I import them to Unreal Engine, so food for thought. This is something that I'm going to improve on in my next efforts, my next endeavors in making something similar like this. There's going to be a very narrow shot, so I don't need to focus on too many buildings. So once the buildings were in place, I set up a landscape mode right here. This is going to be the grass. Basically the lawn of all the buildings here and all the surroundings is going to be covered by a grass texture, and then by 3D foliage of grass and also some trees along the street as well, and maybe behind the property too. Now that big white building behind those three houses is called a trolley barn, according to the Montclair official historical records, which is the house where the streetcars or the trolleys, as they're called there, are stored. That's like their depot where they're being repaired and stuff like that. It doesn't exist anymore. It's an apartment building these days, so I just based the shape off of a map that I found from 1933, and this is the basis of a lot of the structure of these buildings and this layout. So anyway, I found my little grass texture using a Quixel bridge, where you can download a lot of free 3D assets, 3D textures, foliage as well, meshes. It's great stuff. So then I put on a tileable grass texture, and upon looking at actual photos and postcards of Montclair and the similar places of that time, I noticed that the actual concrete pavement is very light colored. It's not really like a dark rough gray as it is today. It's more smooth and closer to off-white. So I tried to replicate that here. I changed the UV mapping a lot, and as we can see here, I UV mapped incorrectly. I projected as a plane when I should have done it as a box, so I'm going to fix that up later. After that, it's onto the road, the main road, the street here, which is actually very dark according to all the pictures that I've seen. The road itself actually does not have any markings at this point in the 1920s. Like there's no like lines in the middle of the road. So now I'm just basically rudimentarily trying to figure out the shots that I'm going to use for the documentary. Looking through other postcards of this street, as you can see here, this is the start of this street. It actually had trolleys running through it. So upon researching a bit further, I discovered that the trolleys on this particular street were discontinued in 1928. So I thought that was the perfect basis for my time period for this little moment here. And as you can see, right where the tracks are on the street, the asphalt of the street kind of switches into a more of like a cobblestone pavement. So I decided to do like a little blend texture where basically in the middle of the road it turns into cobblestone, and as you go further out and reach the pavement, it turns into regular smooth asphalt. And I tried really hard to make this work. I tried so goddamn hard to make this work. I was basically making like an auto landscape, which is what you can do in Unreal Engine. Basically, it changes the kind of texture that is being displayed depending on the slope of the surface of the landscape here. And this was not the correct method for this particular road here. I even exaggerated the curve of the street just to see if it was actually working slightly, and it was not. It really was not. So I decided to move on and remap the UVs for the pavement instead as a box. So I fixed it up, so then as you can see on the edge here, it looks fine. Now it looks fine. So anyway, I decided to remesh it, which is basically turning this giant plane into a bunch of little triangles. And now, basically, I just followed a tutorial on YouTube how to make a blend texture, kind of easy to do. And with a little bit of tinkering and finagling, I finally figured out how to do it. So basically, I'm going to put down the tracks on the road, and then where the tracks are, I'm going to paint on the other cobblestone texture. And this way, I have more control over the texture. So now once I got a nice little railway track here, I used a Boolean modeling mode to basically cut off all the elements of the mesh that I did not want. So basically I just made a big square, and everything inside that square gets cut off and deleted. Later on in this process of making this little street, I learned of a lot of different methods how to do that more efficiently, and I didn't have to make a cube every goddamn time. I figured out some other methods. So anyway, just following the pictures and the postcards fairly closely, I kind of aligned the tracks to where I thought it would look fine. There you go, something like that, and then I started to paint on the cobblestone texture. Don't worry that the lighting of the cobblestones does not match. I can fix that later. Also, the size of the cobblestones is way too large, and that's fine. I can change that later. I'm just concerned about getting the blend right. So there you go. I remapped it a little bit, and now the cobblestones look much better. And now I can manually change the lighting, change the normals, intensity, and the brightness and the saturation to make the cobblestones blend in better with the rest of the road. I'm sure I can learn more methodology, how to do this more efficiently later on. I'm still learning how to do this. I basically followed through like half of an Unreal Engine tutorial, and I decided, fuck it, I don't have the patience to finish this. I just wanted to get this project done as soon as possible. Since I have over a decade of experience in Blender, it's not that dissimilar, honestly, transitioning to Unreal Engine. A lot of the methodology is very, very similar. Concerning this main house in the middle, I found a wood wall texture from Quixel Bridge that you can get right in Unreal Engine, downloaded it, and remapped it onto the walls here. Adjusted the colors and the contrast to make it look kind of like what it looks like now. This house in particular, this is the narrator's house. We're going to be looking at the room a bit later on. I didn't model the room for this particular effort here. I might do a part 2 on how to finally finish this scene and actually set up the cameras and all that. So yeah, this house was actually built in 1875, and you can actually look this information up. And I'm just under the creative assumption that it did not change much structurally since then. So I followed very closely to the pictures that I found on Google Maps and the listings on Zillow that I found as well. If you want to find these locations yourself, if you still want to do that, I don't suggest you reach out to these people who still live here, you know? But if you find these locations, it's all up to you. I'm not going to tell you anything, you know? So then I downloaded 3D stairs. It's pretty close to what I was looking for, though I can adjust it better by using a little lattice editing method from the modeling mode. And this way I can fill up all these gaps. I can just stretch this mesh down to fill up all those gaps. We're not going to be focusing too much on any element here. It's just going to be a single pan out, and we're not going to be exploring this environment very detailedly, so it doesn't matter that much if it looks a bit rough around the edges and there's some stretching in the textures. That's completely fine. Then I got a little modular fence, which is pretty close to what it is in real life, though it doesn't need to be exactly the same, just kind of the same effect, you know? So I positioned it just the right way, and now we can go to modeling mode and duplicate. Don't forget to duplicate each mesh before you lattice edit it and change its form, because then if you don't duplicate, it's just going to change every single instance of the same mesh. So here I found the polycut tool in modeling, which is pretty much the same thing as the Boolean editing tool, which I used before, but this is more efficient this way. There you go. So I did this, did that. I duplicated many things, many times. So this is going to be the end post, basically. I edited that down. I made it longer, a bit wider. This is where the fence is going to end. And as you can see, I just completely deleted the original fence that was next to the door there. I'm gonna put that in later. Oh, there it is, it's back again. Anyway, it's fine, don't worry about it. I just edit out some of the parts that I don't need, and there you go. Now all I have to do is change the texture around a bit so it doesn't look so rusted. It looks a bit brighter, and then copy and paste the whole thing and move it over to the other side, and now I'm done. That part's done. It looks great. And now this bottom section, pretty much every house has this bottom section made of, looks like concrete. And I imagine this is the basement level. Every basement level is made of concrete, basically. So I got a concrete texture and UV projected it, made it look right, changed the tiling, and changed the brightness a bit to make it look a bit more new. Because, of course, this is not long after it was completed. Like, honestly, about 50 years since it was completed, so it's not that new anyway. But it's honestly kind of amazing to me that all these houses and the houses beyond these 5 houses that I decided to model for this scene were in existence for a very long time, like 150 years or so. Most of these houses were built before the 1900s. So I'm pretty confident that everything that I've built here existed in 1928, where this scene takes place. So now I got some molding to make everything look more interesting, more refined here. This kind of stuff was a lot more popular back in the good old days. Make things a lot more fancy. It doesn't take that much effort to make something like this, I guess, but I guess it's just some extra resources that nowadays people don't bother with, you know? Because it doesn't structurally add anything to it, it just makes it look nice, and I guess people don't have time for that. Anyway, there's a wooden plank, put it there. Gonna change the brightness and change the contrast to make it match with the whiteness of everything here. So now I copied and pasted that wooden plank and I made it more square around the edges and really long. And these are going to act as the support post for this little outside door roof area thing. I know there's an actual name for this, but I don't know what it is. I don't come across this design in my regular day-to-day life here in China, so I really don't know what it's called, but I'm sure lots of you know. Leave a comment down below and tell me, what is this called? This outside the door tiny roof thingy. Kind of like a doorway gazebo. I really don't know what it is. A portcullis. I've decided this is called a portcullis. Anyway, so now I went to get a board from Quixel Bridge, a 3D asset, a cutting board actually. So I'm gonna put this cutting board right underneath this roof. So this will fill up this empty space right above our heads. And of course I'm gonna adjust the coloring of the texture to make it match a bit better. This looks pretty nice. It looks like a lot of tiny wooden boards, like wooden planks, which is, I'd imagine, what it's made of in real life. But I didn't have to model all of that. I just used a wooden cutting board. There you go. And now there's that 3D model from Blender, which has been now completely replaced by other assets that I got from Unreal Engine. So now I can just delete the original model from Blender, and now it just makes it look a lot cleaner. Then I moved on to use that molding along the sides of all the sides of the roof. I'm gonna have this molding here. Just stretch it around, make it longer, make it wider, just to make it match. And I'm following the Blender model. As you can see here, it's a very flat, boring looking guide, basically. And once all this molding is complete, I'm gonna delete the original Blender model. It's honestly not that difficult to do this, it just takes a long time. And it took me a while to get used to the interface of Unreal Engine 5, because it's just kind of annoying that I always have to have the gizmo, which you use to change the scale, change the rotation, the location. I don't like that you have to always have it in view on the screen in order for you to do anything with it, because in Blender you don't have to do that. You can just use shortcuts and you can rotate the scale and move along the X, Y, or Z axis. And you don't have to have the gizmos on screen. You just have to select the object that you want to move around and change around. So anyway, I use a pin cut now, which is another tool that I discovered, which is basically cutting along a certain axis, which I can rotate around. And on the one half, it remains, and everything on the other half of that plane axis, it gets deleted. So that's pretty nice. And here's that wooden plank again. It makes its reappearance, and I use it for these little like mustaches or like eyebrows of the house. I'm not quite sure what they are, but looking at the photos that I have from the real house, they exist, so I just put them in there. And now I can delete the original Blender guide for the molding. And now it's all just original Unreal Engine assets here, which is great. Now I can use the lattice mode to better edit these corner pieces to make them better match with the rest of the molding and just kind of, I guess, mold them into shape, huh? And yeah, it's very finicky. There's no real science to it. Just do what you feel is right. Just be patient. You're gonna have lots of patience doing this kind of stuff. Lots of time too. This whole thing, by the end of the video, what you see, it probably took me on and off, let me see, what, 2 weeks I think. But honestly, there was 1 week where I didn't do anything because I was in the hospital, so maybe it just took me 1 week basically. Then I take that wooden plank and I add these little borders around each corner of the house so it doesn't look like there's just a enormously long, stretchy plank of wood that is wrapping around the entire perimeter of the house. This is basically like the frames that contain these portions of planks. It's gonna make it look a lot more realistic. Then I found a good wood roof shingle texture and I added that to the roof after UV mapping it a bit better. Then I recolored it, make it look a bit more closer to what I'm looking for. I did the same thing for the roof of the portcullis, whatever it is. Get it close enough to the same scale. I don't really mind if it's not quite in the same scale, because honestly, I don't think you can see all that much from the camera angle. As my favorite Faulty Towers quote goes, what the I don't see, the chef gets away with. So then I took this pipe from Quixel Bridge again, and then I made it long, and this is going to be the water spout, I believe it's called, or the gutter. No, it's the water spout. So when it's raining on the roof, all the water is collected, and it goes down this pipe and goes down to the ground. So I made a portion long, and I duplicated it, and I made the shorter duplication of it curved, so it curves out, and it shoots the water out at an angle here. And I'm gonna copy and paste this and add it to pretty much every other house. I don't need to model it again every single time. There you go, something like that. It's pretty close to what it is in real life. And upon looking at photos of the early 1900s houses in Montclair, they did have these water spouts, so it is period accurate, I believe. So then I went back to the landscape modes and I lifted up the grass texture just a little bit because the pavement is slightly elevated and it shouldn't be as elevated, so I used like a erosion tool to slightly add some height to the grass texture here, and then I can adjust it in lots of different ways and fix my mistakes. There you go, something like that. So then I found a door mesh on Quixel Bridge, and this is what I'm gonna use to make the front door of the narrator's house. So I went into modeling mode, poly cut, to cut out all the bits that I did not want. Now there's this one bit right up here, which is like a sensor for a security alarm, which is not all right. So I decided to go to the Boolean mode, and I Booleaned it out with the cutting board mesh. And when you Boolean out meshes, the bit that is cut out retains the texture of the object that you cut it out with. So that's pretty cool. So this way I can make that part look like wood, you know, and not just a black square again. So then I got a fiberglass texture, and I put it onto this plane to kind of replicate the look of a very reflective pane of glass, I suppose. This is my initial effort to make glass and windows, and this is going to change a lot over the course of this project. I was not going to make them transparent at all, just going to make them really reflective. See, kind of like that. And I determined it did not look realistic enough, so then I ended up actually making kind of like a glass texture. And now this is the first model that I used that I actually got from CG Trader, links down below, of a window, which I'm going to use for all these houses. And then I got distracted and started to learn about Robbie Dupree and the song Steal Away. And then I got distracted again and looked up the song on YouTube. Really great song, really chill, even though it pretty much sounds just like What a Fool Believes, just with 85% less soul. Anyway, I went back and I created a glass texture, a very rudimentary glass texture. I was following tutorials around and made this really fancy texture with a refraction index, as you can see, which bends the light behind it, and it just looks weird. And then I like increased the normals and it just turned into a light source, which is really weird. I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. So then I decided not to do that. Yeah, let's not increase the normals of that for whatever reason. And then following along the tutorial, I introduced ray tracing to make it look more realistic, and it just made it look like it just like the pits of hell. And I decided there is no ray tracing needed, apparently, because I cannot make it look good. So I just winged it and made it my own. I might adjust it a bit later on as well. So just line it up with this wooden window frame and group them all together by pressing Ctrl G. So now I can rotate it around all in one go. I don't need to select all of them individually again, though the mistake I did was the plane that I used for the glass is not of the same rotation and scale as the rest of it. It's been modified, so when I adjust the scale of this grouped window, the window moves in a completely different way. So I learned my mistake again, and this is what I'm not gonna do next time. So following along the Google Maps photos that I saw from Street View, I copied and pasted that window, and I put it everywhere where there's a window in the actual house here. Again, I'm under the assumption that it has not changed since it was built in 1875, or at least it was at this state in 1928, and I think it's quite likely. Though there are other houses here where there was some renovations and additions later on in their life, so I made the decision to adjust some things and guess what it might have looked like back in those days. Now, what I didn't show you here is that I decided to import another Blender model originally for the window frame, and that just kind of made my original house here that I worked on kind of disappear and go away. So then I had to quickly rebuild it myself, but this time I just used planes instead of the actual Blender cube, basically. So every wall is a single plane, and that's why there's a lot of light coming through now. So now using the Boolean mode, I make all these cubes inside the window frames, and then I basically scoop out a hole in all these planes to make openings for all the windows, as you can see here. Looking around, I can see that there's a whole lot of light going through the walls here. So what I did to combat that is I duplicate it by copying and pasting it and moving it slightly inwards and changing the inside wall texture to concrete to make it a dark texture. This in turn made the house, the inside of the house at least, from the outside look incredibly dark. So I'm not sure if this is going to be that effective or is it going to be that realistic. I might change it in the future. So then I got another CG Trader model of drawstring blinds, which are basically the blinds that were used on all these houses back in the day, from what I could tell from my pictures here. They all look the same. They're all pretty much in the exact same position. Though for some windows and for some rooms, I decided to close the blinds just to make some more variety for this house, you know, make things a bit more interesting. So I'm thinking maybe in the future, once I'm completing this animation, I might add like some furniture or some static photos of rooms basically and put them into those window spaces to make them look more lived in, because it looks incredibly dark at this point. And now, as you can see, this is me scaling that grouped window, and the actual glass does not behave the same way, so that's a bit annoying. So I have to Shift-G to ungroup it, and then scale the glass pane individually, and then group it again. So this is going to be the windows for the basement level, and I just very simply copy and paste them in here, and put them everywhere where I can see them from the pictures to make them look pretty realistic, and Bob's your uncle. I get those cubes again, and I scoop out the windows. Now, what am I looking for here? I'm looking for a grid. That's right, because I think, yeah, there is a certain metal grid that's on the corner here, so I found a metal sheet texture, and I put it on there, and I adjusted the lightness, and it looks pretty close to what it is in real life. I'm not really fussed with making it look completely true to life, because you're not going to be focusing too much on it. And I think this might be the final touch of this house right here. I think it might be. Though no, it isn't. This is my very, very fancy, very finagly way of making the corners of the basement concrete level less sharp. So I took that wooden plank that you see along all the corners of the house, and I squished it down. And then I basically molded it to better squeeze the concrete here. And then I'm gonna change this texture to the concrete texture. And now these corners will look a lot less unrealistically sharp. As you can see, it looks a bit rough around the edges here. I think that looks more realistic. I found another way to go around this later on. I'm not gonna use this method for every house. I think it's just this one. So yeah, that looks pretty nice again. So I just copied and pasted it, and I did it again for the other two visible corners that you can see from the camera angle. Just use the lattice modeling mode to better squeeze to the shape of the concrete there. And Bob's your uncle. I did it. Great. So now once that's done, I zoom out and admire my handiwork. I changed the scalability to cinematic to make it look ultra high res and make sure it looks fine. And I think it looks fine and dandy enough. Though there is a chimney here. There's a chimney model here, which I just added a simple brick texture on it. I don't think it's going to be actually visible in the shot, but maybe it just causes some caustic reflections on the other house, so I just left it in there. A super simple thing. So then I adjusted the color of the door and adjusted the color of that cutting board texture as well, and now it's a very white house. So now I went over to the neighbor's house. I'm not going to focus too much on what I did with the neighbor's house and all the other houses because I pretty much did the exact same thing, though this is the difference here is that I used the stairs modeling mode to make some stairs rather than download a 3D asset of stairs. And then I found a wooden baluster, and I downloaded that, and I'm gonna use that for posts. They're gonna be all along this porch section, I guess. Tarpaulin. This tarpaulin section. No, that's in front of the front door here, with the little roof. It's called a tarpaulin. So I added this wooden facade texture originally, though then I quickly changed to a stucco texture, which I think is more realistic to what's happening here. Adjusted the levels to make it more white, kind of like more off-white, and copy and pasted lots of stuff all over the place. Super simple stuff. And then I went to, ooh, how fancy. I went to orthographic top-down view and created this little fence from these tiny versions of this wooden baluster. I originally tried to download a similar looking fence that's seen currently in real life, but I didn't find anything similar, so I just decided to model it myself. It looks quite similar to what is being depicted here, kind of like this. And then I got a Japanese house wooden floor texture. It's a very glossy wood texture. That's going to be like the railing for the fence, and copy and pasted that same board for the stairs, and then for the handlebar, I don't know what it's called. I just made it. And then there's a wooden storage box 3D asset which I used, and I flipped it upside down, and this is what I used as like the floorboards. And now this is my new method of making that cement basement level look more smooth. So I took that wooden box model, applied the cement texture on it, and I replaced the original Blender model with that wooden box model, so now the edges look a lot more smooth. So then I copied and pasted the same door a couple of times. I think I mirrored once. This is kind of close to what's happening in real life. I adjusted some textures, added that corner piece again to all the corners. I downloaded CG Trader wicker chair, which I think it adds a bit more flavor, a bit more life to this very, very empty tarpaulin section. Added all the windows, all the window scoops, and yeah, and the house is pretty much done, at least for now. Though there's like some very tiny windows here. This tiny window has a certain grid pattern, which I basically stole from the door. I used the pin cut method to take out that grid pattern, and I applied it to all these windows, like that. Looks pretty snazzy. I like it a lot. Looks great. There you go. There's the house, though I did forget to make cavities for the rooms. Now, considering that this is actually a box, basically, once you scoop out the windows with that Boolean box method, all it just does is just scoop out the hole for the window, and then there's no hole inside. You know, it's still a solid block of a 3D mesh, so you need to put in boxes inside the mesh and then use the Boolean tool to make inside cavities for the rooms this way. So this is what I did, and this is what I did for the rest of the houses. Right, and then I added the blinds to all the windows and make it all look snazzy and nice. Very nice. I like it a lot. And oh, and I almost forgot to add a roof texture. So this is the shingle roof. It's pretty close to the coloring of today. And there you go. Now looking at pictures, there's only a couple of pictures of the actual trolley house of Montclair and just the entranceway, which is not in the shot here. And I used one more picture of like windows of a different trolley barn, and that was the basis of my modeling of this building here. So I just added a preliminary brick wall texture, which is very, very obviously tiled. It doesn't look that great. I'm gonna adjust that later. I just don't want to look at that white box in the background all the time. And I did the same thing across the street. Across the street here is an apartment building, which is still standing today. And I did the same preliminary brick texturing. Then I had another look at the house, at the real pictures of this house here. And they have this curved arch segment along the portcullis here. And I decided to replicate that, make it look a lot more fancy this way. And there you go. Then the first two houses along the street are done. Apparently not. Oh yeah, that's right. Just as some normals there. And then I went to the third house along the way, the opposite side of the narrator's house. I downloaded a wooden staircase and I used the pin cut tool to cut out all the stuff that I didn't need, and I stretched it around a bit using the lattice. There is, of course, a whole wooden platform here to stand on, but I decided to not model it because you won't be able to see it from the camera angle. Then I did a similar thing as the previous neighbor's house, as I used a wooden plank, and then there's some funny stuff going on here. I made a box and I made it a funny shape, and then I UV mapped it in a certain way to make it match the rest of the wooden texture here. Yeah, it's just lots of latticing, basically. Lots of copy and pasting, window frames, adjusting UV mapping, all the same old stuff. There's a lot of it, but it's all same old stuff. Now, I decided to do something funny with the door here. I used the actual window frame to make the door. I stretched some parts around and I made a door out of it. Looks good enough, apparently, I guess. I made my job kind of difficult because in the original Blender model, I was following along the Google Maps map, basically, and it was not completely aligned along the X and Y axes. So it was slightly, it was like a couple of degrees, you know, tilted. And once you insert it into Unreal Engine and start modeling it, it doesn't align with the X and Y axes. And every time you have to add some elements to the house, you kind of have to rotate them very, very slightly, you know, to the left or to the right. So just kind of annoying. Something which I would not do the next time, because you cannot tell from the camera angles that it is aligned exactly to the X and Y axes of Unreal Engine 5 or not. Anyway, I adjusted the texturing of that rail, of the trolley rail, and then I decided to go back to all the houses and I added more of that borders for all the roof edges as well, because that's going to make the roofs look a lot more realistic too. So it just doesn't look like a endless, seamless texture that is repeating all over the roof. It looks a lot more realistic this way. So I went back through all the 3 houses so far and I did the same thing. I just copy and pasted the roof texture and I put it onto that wooden plank there. The tiling doesn't match at all, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to see it up close anyway, so it's fine. But at least you see the 3D element and not the texture itself. That adds a lot of depth and realism. There you go. Looks pretty good. I like it a lot. Then I added all the room cavities for this house, and then I booleaned them out, and then I booleaned out the window cavities, and then I'm done. Next, I decided to add a dust decal to the roofs of these houses, because I think it's a bit too obvious to see the tiling of the roofs. So I used a decal actor. This is how you do this thing in Unreal Engine. Use a decal actor to basically show how the decal will be projected and onto which surface at what angle, and then you select the decal texture right there, and then you can see it's right here. So using this dirty dust decal, it adds more variety to the texture of the roof, and hopefully it makes it look less repeatable, you know? Of course, I'm gonna adjust the levels and the colors of this dirt here so it doesn't look so obviously speckled, but at least it adds some color variety to the roof and it looks a bit less tiled. Of course, I'm going for realism here. I discovered a method of better blending textures later on in my process here, which I could have easily used for these roofs, which I didn't. So, food for thought. This is something that I can do later. I'm going to share later on how I made tiled textures look completely untiled very easily. Next, we move across the streets to get to this very fancy looking house. Kind of looks like a castle. Usual same old UV projection, adds the wood texture for the walls. This actually I had to adjust the path here. It didn't look quite right apparently. Copy and pasted the posts from previous houses and copy and pasted the stairs as well. The wooden boards, the planks. I found another wooden baluster, and this is going to be part of the fence of this house. It looks pretty nice, very delicate, very cool. Something like this. I just group it all together, copy and paste it along the way onto all the sides. Super easy. This side of the street is not going to be all that well seen, actually. So there's not that much reason to make it that detailed. And most of the new textures that I downloaded from Quixelbridge for this side of the street are actually low res, low quality textures, I think 1K, as opposed to the medium quality 2K or the high quality 4K, because they're going to be very far away. So you don't need all that high poly and high quality texturing either. So I took that ball of the wooden baluster and I put it on there, changed it to a wooden texture, and I used those balusters to complete the staircase railing. Super cool. I found another roof molding. It kind of looks like skirting boards as well. Maybe it is skirting boards. So I just downloaded another asset there and I put it along the house. I got this decorative thing here, this ornament. I don't really know what it is, but it is seen these days on this house. This is something very similar, of course. It's not the exact same pattern, but it does get the message across. And I copied and pasted it all around where it's supposed to be, all along these wooden posts. And there you go. It looks a lot more fancy now. I got this modular building roof trim kit. So now we can call it trim too. This house is really interesting. I used another decal for this portion because it looks like there's like some ornamentation, like a strip of hieroglyphics or something, just all along that part. So I just decided to do something similar. And I added all this fancy roof tiling, this roof, skirting? I can't even remember the word now. This one looks really fancy. Really fancy. There's lots of tricky scaling to do here to make it look right. And this window pattern also was quite tricky to do. It's quite a complex pattern here. It's got lots of ornamental work here. Just something decorative. It doesn't really add anything functionally, but I just wanted to replicate to the best of my ability. All this complex artistic stuff that you can put on houses, that adds a lot more realism, you know? So then, on the third floor, there's this really interesting ornamentation concerning kind of 1/4 of a wagon wheel. So I just took a wagon wheel model and I cut out 75% of it, and I did something similar. And I did something very similar to it. It is like 2/4 of a wagon wheel attached to either side of this window here, which is really strange. It looks very much 1800s kind of style. So I decided to put that in there. It adds a lot of character. That's a lot of character. I took another door model from Quixelbridge. I used the pin cut method to cut out everything I don't need, and I put it on the front of this house here. That's going to be the front door. Right there. There you go. This roof has actually 2 roof textures, a fish scale texture and the regular shingles. So I did that. Usual foray, the room cavities, the window cavities, and then boolean it out, make holes. And I forgot to add blinds, which I think I might do now or later. Yeah, I'm doing it now. That's fine. And that looks good. Looks pretty good. And then there's this decorative molding, piping, stone work here at the front of the house. It's something very similar. In real life, of course, it's not the same thing, so I just got something similar and I put that on there on the front of the house. Adds even more character. So now I noticed that from the angle of the narrator's house, you wouldn't actually be able to see all the houses that I modeled across the street. Basically, the angle is wrong. I determined that the angle is wrong, and I might actually have to, when I'm making that shot, I have to basically shift one side of the street completely to the left or right to make the shot work. But that's not an issue because, again, like Terry, the chef from Fawlty Towers said, what the eye don't see, the chef gets away with. And then let's move on to this house. I only modeled 2 houses in Blender on this side of the street because this particular house and its neighbor to the left are actually the exact same house. These days, this house on the right did have some renovation work done to make it look a bit more different, but I'm strongly assuming that originally both of these houses had the exact same blueprints. So Basically, I just made one house and then I copied and pasted it and I moved it to the left. I just changed the wooden walls into a different texture and a different color, but basically it is the exact same house. Now this one has a balcony on the second floor. It's really interesting design here. Apparently I got the scaling completely wrong, so then I had to very, very sloppily lattice adjust the mesh here, and it made a lot of trouble for myself. It took a long time. It was very finicky because I just messed up the mesh completely. Fortunately, with the power of editing, you didn't have to see too much of it. So now I made all these the fence posts, and all these framings here along the walls. I actually went back to the first house on the opposite side of the street, and I added more of these wooden frames to make it look more interesting. And I added more of these molding. And then I got to the door of the balcony on the second floor, I believe. Or is this the front door? No, this is the front door. I changed it a lot, apparently. So then I took this wooden pipe and I used it to make this very interesting, intricate circular window that is on the side of the front door here in real life. It's actually ovular. So I put it in here, adjusted the color to make it look more like the color of the house here. And I added these little ornaments, these little 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock markers almost at the sides of this window frame. And once they looked right, I called it good. I added all the windows in all the right places. I had to adjust lots of things. I probably got the scaling all wrong for some of this, and the third floor needed a lot of work. I did not get the modeling of the third floor right because the third floor windows also come out in this kind of shape, in this 3-window trapezium shape. So I kind of had to do a little surgery to make it look kind of okay. Doesn't look too bad, honestly. There's something quite similar to this. Considering that it's going to be very far away from the camera, you won't be able to focus too much on it, so I'm not too concerned about it, and it looks pretty good here. Usual stuff, add the room cavities and add the window cavities, and then we boolean all of it out. It's going to be great. Add a door to the second floor balcony right there. Change the color around a bit, and then scoop everything out. Scoop out all the windows, all those window cavities. This house is interesting because the first floor and the second floor are actually made of a different material. At least it's covered in a different material. It's more like stucco on the bottom and wood on the second floor. So then I selected everything and I copied and pasted it over to the left here. And there you go. I just changed the wood texture on the top floor a bit. And that's pretty much it, I think. I feel like I forgot all the blinds though, which I might have to add those later. And there you go. These are the 3 houses that I made. And now I went back to the trolley barn. I learned some more new Unreal Engine 5 methods. So I used the try select modeling mode to select the roof portion of the model, and I separated it from the walls. So now I can add a different roof texture to the roof and not make it all brick. So now I'm trying out this new method to make a seamless texture look like it doesn't repeat. So I use the texture coordinate node, connected to all these other nodes. It's very similar to a Blender, and add lerp, lots of lerp. I'm pretty sure I can just link to a YouTube video that explains it a lot better than I can. And I used a macro deviation noise texture basically to make it look like it's not tiled at all. So basically there's just like this noise texture of a mix of black and white, you know, and basically all the portions that are black are texture A, all the portions that are white are texture B. So texture A is a brick texture and texture B is another brick texture, which is slightly different at a different scale. And because of this random macro noise texture, it doesn't look tiled at all, which is great. And I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the roof. And see, it doesn't look tiled at all. I cannot see the tiles at all because it's a randomized mix of 2 brick textures. They might not be at the same scale, but it's so far away from the camera, you can't even notice. So then I did the same thing for the roof texture. For some reason, the roof texture doesn't quite look as good, but it doesn't matter because we're not going to see it from a top down anyway. It's going to be from an angle. So anyway, I added some more of these frames along the roof and along the walls to make it look a bit more realistic, kind of like the ledge of a roof. There you go. Makes it look a lot better. I don't need to model the entirety of the barn because you won't be able to see the entirety of the barn. It's just gonna be like a little portion there. So then I had another look at this camera angle and noticed that the side of this neighbor's house is visible and I have no windows on it and no decorations. So I went ahead and fixed that. It's got some really interesting window designs there. I think it's for the staircase. And the second half of the house here, I completely modeled incorrectly, judging from the Google Street View photos. So I quickly spliced it apart and I put it back together again, and I fixed it, I guess, to the best of my abilities, and I think it looks quite seamless. So then I scooped out the window holes, and then Bob's your uncle, I got it done. Looks pretty cool. Then I added another drainage pipe there. It looks pretty good. Next thing is this apartment building, and I applied that same pretty unnoticeable tiled texture, that blended brick texture that I made. It looks really great here as well. Especially from a distance, you cannot tell a damn thing. It's great. I'm so happy about this discovery. So then I downloaded some windows here, some gridded windows, which I think will look pretty good with the trolley barn. There's some different shapes involved, like some bricked up windows, some open windows without any grid, but I decided to not use those and just use a single type of window, and I was just going to model this one single section of the trolley barn that's going to be visible in between the houses that's going to be in the shot there. So I used the try select tool to select all the tries that I wanted to delete, and deleted those. And then I clearly I missed a bunch, so then I went back in with the pin cut tool and cut off all the leftovers. And these were going to be the windows that I was going to be using. Observing from the pictures there, I'd say there's going to be two floors of windows, maybe a line of 3 windows or so in this little section. And I was just going to model this single section that was going to be visible in camera and leave the rest of the building as is. So then I made up my Boolean window scooper, set it to shape of this particular window, and then I duplicated those a few times, the first floor and the second floor. And then I started scooping out the window holes, and it looks pretty good. However, it does look incredibly dark inside, and I don't want that to happen, so I scooped out the inside so you can see straight through it to the opposite side. However, I don't want it to look like there's just an empty hole in the back, so I kind of made up some rudimentary window holes, as it were. You're not going to see very clearly through the camera, so it doesn't really matter. Then I got some rusty car exhaust shapes, made up a sheet floor for the second floor, and then I made some basically trolley shapes and lined them up inside the first floor here, just to create some shadows, some silhouettes of maybe there's something inside here, you know? I don't think it's very visible, but what you gonna do? Then, upon observing the map and Google Earth as well, there's this little like barn building that's behind this house right here. I don't have a clear view of it, so I'm just winging it and making a fairly simple barn shape. Maybe it's a shed or something. It's going to be quite far away in the back. I don't need to bother too much on the details. I got this wooden double door, or is it triple door? And I set it to the same scale as the front door, and I attached this to this barn building and set it to the approximately correct angle and position behind the houses. That's in between the houses on the street and the apartment building behind it. And then, as long as I'm here, I just went and started working on the apartment building right here. I made those simple window shapes based on the Google Earth images. Again, I'm assuming that this building has not changed much in 100 years. Some of these walls have a balcony as well, so I quickly modeled a balcony using the iron fence that I used on the narrator's house. It's fine to reuse these textures. They're going to be so far away, you're not going to be able to notice anything. It's fine. Pretty simple arrangement here. And then I scoop out all those windows and doors and make holes for them, and then make holes for the rooms as well, the inside cavities. And you got these 3 walls basically with modeled balconies and or windows, and that's going to be all that's in view of the camera, and that's all I need to work on. Next is the biggest headache of this project is the foliage, the grass. So I downloaded a couple of grass 3D foliage assets and I started applying them onto the landscape here. You have to finagle it and try to figure out what's the best scale for the grass, just to make sure it's not too big, not too small. And as you can see here, I started to run into a little bit of a problem, because this is a feature of Unreal Engine, is that when you add foliage, it goes through LODs, basically. I don't know what they stand for, but basically they're different versions of the mesh. The first LOD is the one that you see when the camera is up close to it. It is the most highest quality, and when you go further away, it transitions into a low quality 2D plane, basically, of the grass, and it really doesn't look that good. There's some tutorials that I looked at on YouTube where you can adjust the texture of that 2D billboard to make it look more in line with the initial high quality LOD, you know? And I didn't seem to be getting positive results at all. And since this is not going to be a game, I don't need to run it in real time. You know, it's going to be a pre-rendered cutscene, if you will, so I don't need to bother with this kind of optimization. So I tried lots of things just to make it look better. It was difficult, and I feel like I wasn't getting anywhere. So what I did manage to do is to make them transition a bit more smoothly between the high quality and the low quality versions of the grass, which is great. So instead of just immediately seeing shit, you just gradually start seeing shit, which is not very helpful at all, for me anyway. So what I ended up doing is just make them slightly more transparent, which is kind of defeating the purpose of even having the whole grass there. So I just gave up on it for now, and then I started cleaning up the paths and deleting all the grass that was on the paths. Super easy to do. And then looking at different sections of the road here that were available on the postcards, I noticed that there's actually a border between the walking pavement and the street that is like a strip of grass and trees. That's where the trees are planted. These days, that section is mostly pavement. However, back in those days, I imagine it was just a separation of grass in between the pavement and the street, and that's like the buffer zone between the cars, you know? I quickly updated the mesh to make it look like there's a strip of green in between the pavement and the road, and I added the grass in this new portion really quickly, even though it didn't look that good. So then I went to the Epic Games Marketplace and looked for some trees to download and use. And upon perusing a little bit, I found this Spectacular City Park Environment Collection. So it's a free download, and you're free to use the assets whatever way you want. I downloaded the project and went in, and my god, there's lots of bloom here. There's lots of effects here that I'm not familiar with yet, but I just had a quick look around and see what it looks like. And it looks pretty expansive, it looks pretty great, even though the road texture is kind of funky. Like the white lines on the road, the white markings are so heavily raised and embossed, it's just kind of ridiculous. I really don't know what the hell they're doing there. And just went to the fountain here, had a look at the fountain water effects. Pretty cool. So what you can do here is that you can take any of these assets from this project and you can migrate them to your own new project. So I had a look at the trees and see that they're swaying in the wind, which is nice, but they're personally swaying way too much. All these wind swaying effects that you see in a lot of these Unreal Engine projects, they sway way too much. It's way too exaggerated, that effect. And the grass looks great too, and it doesn't do that stupid LOD thing. So, interesting. Anyway, so I went to the foliage folder and selected all the trees that I thought would look cool along the streets and next to the houses. Once I selected all of them, I can select to migrate them to a new project. Super easy to do, just follow the steps, nothing to worry about. Put them in the folder, and then open up my own Montclair folder again, and there you go, there's all these trees here. So initially I was worried about making those trees sway in the wind myself. I feel like that blueprint wouldn't be available to me, but it is apparently. They're already swaying in the wind, and I don't have to do anything. And that's nice. However, I do need to adjust the wind intensity by a lot. Okay, once you scale them down, they look absolutely ridiculous, like they're underwater in a coral reef, being moved by the currents. It looks really, really ridiculous. Of course, this is sped up 400%, so this is a lot more intense for the audience like this. So I don't know what to do, I just went into the material settings and into the wind section, and I turned some numbers down by a lot. I guess I'm just experimenting. I really don't know what I'm doing here. Maybe eventually I'll learn better how to control the wind of the mesh. And eventually I got to a point where I was happy with what I was seeing. Like, it wasn't too exaggerated, you know? These trees are actually made of wood, you know? They're not made of paper or like stacked feathers, you know? They're quite rigid and they don't move that much, you know? So once I got this down, roughly I'm imagining that there's one tree in between each house, roughly, in this buffer zone in between the sidewalk and the road. And a lot of these trees have different materials, so I have to adjust each material individually as I lay down the trees and make them stop swaying so much. Then I put on this big tree right here. Was wow, this guy's made of rubber. I mean, it's nuts. So I turned everything down, and it just didn't do it for me. So I turned down more things, and eventually I got to a point where I was fairly happy. And then I put down this tree again on the opposite side, and I rotated it, and it looks pretty good. It doesn't need to be exactly in the shot, you know, but it's gonna cast some shadows on the ground, and that's pretty important to see, you know, that the world just doesn't end outside of the camera. You know, there's an outside world outside of the camera. And upon looking at photos of the current day house here, it does have a few trees on its own property, so I replicated that here. I'm not sure if there were trees there back then in 1928, but anyway, I just decided to do that. I made this tree super big because it was interesting to see what that would look like, and then I made it small again and put it next to this house right around here, roughly around here. And then I went back to the city park project, and I got me some more assets, namely the grass. The grass is not the same kind of grass that you get in Quixel Bridge, and it behaves completely differently. I think it's like a custom mesh. I imported that into my project and laid some down, and my goodness, they look so much better than the other shit. It looks great. I mean, of course it's waving in the wind way too much, but that's okay. I can adjust that later. Actually, I'll adjust that now. There you go. That's much better. So then I adjusted the color a bit just to make it look like what I'm looking for now. A bit darker, a bit more green. Hopefully just more healthy looking. There you go, not too bad. And of course it's a bit too big, so I adjusted the scale. 0.2, 0.3, and that looks right around the right height there. Looks great. So now, or 0.4. Anyway, whatever, it's fine. So now the next step is, of course, delete everything that I've put down. All the grass, because the other grass is just completely terrible and I don't want to look at it anymore. So once I got all that deleted, I started laying down the new grass. Initially, it looks a bit more patchy, but then I ran over it again a few more times using different density levels. But it still looks patchy against the 2D grass texture, but I found a way to make it look a lot more seamless and a lot more full. And you're going to see that in a minute or so. So now I went into the 2D grass texture and I adjusted the brightness basically, just to make it better match the 3D assets of the grass, and now it looks much more full. It looks so much better. Even though it is patchy if you look at it from the sky, but you won't look at it from the sky in the video, so it doesn't really matter. So now it's at a really good level. It looks rich, looks healthy, looks great. So now all I gotta do is clean up the paths one more time and get rid of all the grass to make those paths nice and clean, because people back in those days kept their paths really, really clean and pretty. So now I went back to CG Trader and picked up a white picket fence 3D asset, which I'm gonna use for the narrator's house. I kind of feel like this better reflects the kind of personality that the narrator had. I'm not sure if this is really accurate, of course, but it's gonna make the house look a lot more dynamic, more interesting. Some of these houses will have fences, some of them will have hedges, some of them will have flower gardens, just to make things a lot more interesting, you know? So first I made the gate of the white picket fence, and I changed the UV mapping of each single picket, I guess, and I applied a single wood wall texture, but each one had a different UV position so that each picket would have a different section of that single texture projected onto it, so it makes it look a lot more varied. Then I copied and pasted it all over the place and made a little perimeter around the house there, with some slight scale adjustments here and there. And then I move over to the other side and do the same thing again. And now I saw that most white picket fence gates have this diagonal picket across it, just I guess to hold the door better together, so I added that quickly, and now it looks pretty good. And this narrator's house is pretty much complete once I extend the fence around a bit better. There you go. Looks nice and good and tidy and great and nice, great. Next, I went back to this house here and added more trees, just to better reflect what is happening in real life, at least these days, and just to make this house a lot more interesting to look at, a lot more lived in, you know? And then I found me some boxwood bushes here from Quixel Bridge, which of course do that stupid lot thing where they change into a basic square if you go far away enough, just to save on memory. So I could actually just deselect that and just make only the first lot available to look at, which I probably could have done with the grass as well, but whatever, it's fine. So I just copied and pasted that cube of bush, and I set it all around this one house here. And I used the lattice tool to round some of the corners there, and it looks pretty nice. Nice, and I also rounded the ones that are next to the entrance path, just to make it look a bit more varied and dynamic. Looks nice. Then I got some other boxwood shrubberies there, and I inserted them here and there all along this wall of bush, just to make things look a bit more wild. There you go. Not too bad, not too bad. However, I noticed that if you look through the trolley barn, you can actually see right through it to the other side, and it's just empty sky. So I can't have that, because on the opposite side of the trolley barn is of course more street and more buildings and more houses. So I quickly grabbed me a free texture with a watermark on it of an old 3-story house, and I copied and pasted it a couple of times behind the trolley barn, so you can just kind of see from the camera angle here that there is a world beyond, you know? Looks pretty nice. It's not very noticeable, but it adds a lot, I think. So then I added another tree over here next to this house, make things a lot more dense looking. Looks pretty great on this side, at least. However, I feel like the opposite end of the street here has 2 little houses, and the shot is going to be too wide, and you're going to see just empty space on either side of these 3 houses. So I quickly modeled the 4th house along this line here, and luckily it's very basic in shape, it's very boxy. I just copied and pasted one of the roofs here already made, so I can just quickly adjust it just a little bit and make it look a bit more like the real thing. I didn't bother too much with making it look super the same as in real life, though it is pretty close. It is pretty close.
Baby!
So I quickly had to rush to the hospital to take care of a little bit of business and deliver a baby. And then about 1 week later, I'm back at Unreal Engine, and it took me quite a while to reorient myself and figure out what I was doing and what I'm supposed to do next. And wow, looks like it took me a really long time to figure out what the hell I was doing. Jesus, what the hell? So anyway, I figured out what to do, and I added some more windows and a frame for the door, like a door frame, and I added that concrete portion of the basement there. This house has a very interesting shape, and then added some room cavities and some window cavities, and I booleaned it all out. And this house was pretty much done. Added some blinds, of course, as you gotta do. Added some of that roof molding and some of those edges along each corner of the house, along each edge. It looks pretty good. And added even more trees next to this house. this house has a lot of trees going for it. And I added some more trees behind the house and even next to the apartment building there. So just trying to experiment and trying to see the angle of the shot. It looks like I might even have to add one more house, a fifth house along this line. Luckily for me, this house is actually quite similar to this model right here. However, it's like basically a mirror image and it doesn't have a balcony. So I just copied and pasted it and mirrored the whole mesh there and I put it into position. Then I used the try select tool to select all the tries that I needed to delete, and I deleted them. Then I selected some more tries and extruded them out to fill up some holes of the windows and the doorways. And I fixed the V projection so it doesn't look stupid, and it turned out pretty well. I took some stairs from a different house, slopped them onto here, added some more window frames, and I applied a wood wall texture, added some decorations here along the edges. Looks great. This one doesn't look that much like the real counterpart, but it's going to be so far to the side. I hope no one pays attention to it. So if you live here, please don't complain too much. It doesn't look like your house. So then I copied and pasted this street, and I added it to the corner here, which is pretty close to real life, though I don't think you're going to be able to notice this side of the street. Added some more trees for their shadow properties, you know. Maybe from the camera angle, you're going to be able to see some trees in the background, or they're going to be casting some shadows. So I think that's pretty cool. So now I added a camera actor, and from the camera, you can see what the final render is going to look like. And it's actually not as bad as I had initially thought, because this imitates focal lengths and lenses and 35mm stuff, whatever. So actually, you're not going to be able to see the outer edges like you see in the Unreal Engine editor viewport. So this actually looks pretty good already, and I don't need to add any more houses, and I'm happy. I still don't know how to actually render videos in Unreal Engine. I'm going to work that. I'm going to figure that out later. Then I added some more bushes from that city park environment and added them to some of these houses here. Just copied and pasted them. Once I fixed their wind intensity a bit, made them bigger, smaller, made them look a bit more wild and lived in. Cool, looks interesting, And then from looking at some photos of Montclair back in those days, there's some bushes that are going alongside in between the houses, just something like this on the grass. So I decided to replicate that a bit. So I zoomed out with the camera, see what the camera can see if I need to add any more trees in the back or any more buildings in the back. It looks like it looks pretty good already, and I don't need to add anything else, maybe, apart from some decorations to some of these houses. Like this one has a little bit of a bush here, just a little bit of a bush, you know? And this one also has a little bit of a bush. So then I moved across the street and looked at the final possible angle of that shot, and it looks pretty sweet. I don't need to add another thing. This is going to be the final shot of the documentary. It's going to be a zoom out of the narrator's house. Excuse me. So I found some flowers on Quixel Bridge, and I fixed that 2D LOD thing. I just disabled it basically, and I added it around some of these houses to add some more color, you know, because I just don't want this to look all green, you know? I want it to look green and white, apparently. So I added those flowers to this bush here, to this wall of bush here. I think it adds a lot of texture and quality and character. Adds a lot of variety to this design here. And there you go, looks so pretty. I should be like a garden doctor, a doctor of gardening, a gardener, Chauncey Gardner. Days pass so quickly. And then I added some more bushes and some more flowers. This one has a flower bed in front of its portfolio. Added some more flowers, some more colorful field poppies. So they're red and white flowers in here. I copied and pasted them, rotated them a bit, add some more variety, and I'm pretty much done with this house as well. Next up, I had a look at the camera actor and see what the camera sees, and it looks pretty swell. So now I'm gonna have one more final look at all these houses. Of course, add cinematic scaling, so now everything is the highest quality, and this is what the render is actually going to look like. And this is going to be the final shot right here. Looks pretty great. Like this. Maybe the tree's in the way. I'm just anyway, it's fine. And one more final view of everything I've accomplished, and it looks pretty great. This is not finished yet, of course. The video itself is not ready to render. I'm gonna come back for a part 2 where I actually designed the inside of the narrator's house as well, and start setting up the final renders of the videos of this neighborhood. And I'm also gonna have a car that drives by this road, and also a trolley. So that's gonna be fun. It's gonna add a lot of character and life to this whole environment here. So anyway, this is gonna be featured mostly at the beginning and the end of the Ota Benga documentary, which is going to be out eventually this year. I'm sure of it. I'm still working on it, but this is a fun project, and hope you learned something or were inspired by it, maybe. I guess. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Thanks, bye.